his skin was red. كأنه مولى. It was as if he was a freed slave. قال. He said, it was said to him, فَلَمْ يَدْنُ. Why don't you come near this plate? فقال له أبو موسى أدنو فإني قد رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أكل منه. So the narration is not complete here. The person refrained and he said that I don't want to eat because I see that chicken eats impurities. And Abu Musa al-Ashari said, come near the plate, barely, because I have seen the Prophet ﷺ eat from this type of meat. قال إني رأيته يأكل شيئا. So he said, but I have seen the chicken eating something impure. So فحلفت, and then I swore that I would not eat its meat ever. So basically this is the exact same scenario that we saw in the previous hadith. There was a man and he saw chicken and he saw it eating impurity, so he made an oath to Allah, Wallahi, I will never eat chicken again because it eats impurity. Then he's sitting at Abu Musa al-Ashari with him, and this plate is put before them and there's chicken on it. So he backs off because he swore he's not going to eat this. But they explained to him that even though you thought that you were righteous by making this oath, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was to eat it, and so that overrules. And in this narration, there's another narration in Bukhari that explains that this person was told to actually give a kafara for his oath. So he actually gave a kafara, which means a compensation or expiation for breaking his oath. عن أبي أسيد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كلوا الزيت وادهنوا به فإنه من شجرة مباركة. The Prophet ﷺ said, eat olive oil and oil your hair with it, or oil your heads with it, because verily it is from a blessed tree. So again, some say the tree itself is blessed, and other people say it's actually the soil of the tree that's blessed, because the place where this tree grows, or essentially grows, is a place where many, many prophets were sent, in this area of Sham. And so some argue that the tree in and of itself is blessed because Allah has blessed it, or because the soil was blessed, meaning the feet of the different prophets had touched that ground, therefore that the tree grows from a blessed soil. Either way, it's a blessed tree. عن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كلوا الزيت وادهنوا به فإنه من شجرة مباركة. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, eat olive oil and oil your hair with it, because verily it is from a blessed tree. عن أنس بن مالك قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يعجبه الدباء. Anas ibn Malik, the servant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to love squash. Squash used to please the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَأُوتِيَ بِطَعَامٍ أَوْ دُعِيَ لَهُ. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam one day was given some food, or he was invited to a party. فَجَعَلْتُ أَتَتَبَّأُهُ فأضعه بين يديه بما أعلم أنه يحبه. So one day what actually happened was Anas ibn Malik knew that the Prophet ﷺ used to like squash. So one day the Prophet ﷺ was invited to a party, or some food was put before the Prophet ﷺ, and Anas was with him. So Anas radiallahu anh, knowing the habit of the Prophet ﷺ, and in an aim to please the Prophet ﷺ, started searching the whole broth for squash, and he picked up the pieces and he put them before the Prophet ﷺ, because he knew that the Prophet ﷺ loved to eat squash. So first is look at the desire of Anas to please the Prophet ﷺ, and two, notice that he had to search for the squash. So it implies that there was abundant gravy within the broth, meaning there was a lot of liquid in the broth. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ has encouraged us to put extra liquid in the broth so that we can share it with neighbors. Now that was a time when food was very, very, a rare commodity. And so, of course, you want to give the best that you can. But the point is that they used to increase their broth so that many people can eat, because that increases the barakah of the food. So in this day and age, when we have food, we should also try to share the best of it with others so that we increase the barakah of our food. Now we'll get to this later, but increasing the barakah of your food is essential in your life. Because when you increase the barakah of your food, you're increasing, the amount, but you're decreasing the amount that you have to eat. Because with a smaller amount of food, you become more full. And two, you're increasing the results of your food, which is what is key. You want to be able to worship after you eat your food. You want to be able to pray after you eat your food. You want to be a better servant to eating your food. And so when you increase the barakah of your food, you increase the results of the food, which is your prayer, your Quran, your ibadah, your concentration, your studies, if you're in school, etc. So we'll talk about that, inshallah, in the next chapter, about the barakah in food. عن حكيم ابن جابر عن أبيه قال دخلت على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فرأيت عنده دباء يقطع. So I came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what the Sahaba radiallahu anhu says, and I saw that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had squash which was being cut up. فقلت ما هذا? So I said, what is this? قال نكثر به طعامنا. He said, verily we increase our food with it, meaning they place it in their food and they use it for eating. أنه سمع this is from Anas ibn Malik يقول إن خياطا دعا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لطعام صنعه. There was a tailor who lived in Medina, and this tailor invited the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam over for a meal, and Anas, he happened to go with him. قال أنس فذهبت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى ذلك الطعام. So Anas says that I actually went with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to that food, meaning I went with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a guest. فقرب إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خبزا من شعير. So some bread, some barley bread was placed before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ومرقا فيه دباء وقديد. And there was some broth placed before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which there was some squash and there was some meat. قال أنس فرأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يتتبع الدباء حوالي القطعة. Anas says that I watched the Prophet ﷺ at this particular gathering, and he started picking out the squash from the food. He's individually picking out the squash from the food. فَلَمَّا أَزَلْ أُحِبُّ الدَّبَّاء مِنْ يَوْمَئِذٍ. So then Anas says, and from that day on, that day I saw the Prophet ﷺ picking out the individual pieces of squash. I fell in love with squash and I loved it, and from that day on. Meaning, because it was the favorite food of the Prophet ﷺ, I made it my favorite food as well. So this is the truest form of ishq, of the love of the Prophet ﷺ. That because something is favorite to the Prophet ﷺ,